So our next guest I worked with on two separate occasions in different districts. The first time was in Oakland, where she was a college readiness specialist. I was so happy to be working with her then because she was an advocate for school counseling, and we didn't have school counselors at our school at that time. She believes in providing equitable services and making sure our students of color have access to college and career services. You could see that through the work that she's done. Nonprofit work supporting college prep and grad requirements across California, creating college-going systems in Oakland, coaching and program implementation for digital curriculum, school counselor in an alternative high school in Milpitas, college coach for a college support mobile app, and she is now currently a school counselor for a comprehensive high school in Colorado. I love that Diana is a champion for the school counseling profession, and she is always working on her practice. I also have to share this story because it coincidentally popped up on my Facebook memories today when I
Oh,
was
funny.
when I was working at Skyline on a particularly difficult day. I came back to my office and found an anonymous post-it note on my desk and that read, "Just in case no one told you, you are awesome."
Oh,
That note made me smile so hard, and it was
oh.
something I truly needed in that moment. And I later found out that Diana left it for me. So yeah, I mean, I have so many memories about Diana. I'm just so glad that she's here on the podcast with us. And with that, I'd like to welcome Diana Carty to our podcast. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Hi, Diana. Diana, okay. You also left a post-it on my desk
I
because
love it.
I was next door to Elin, but you didn't say I was awesome though. You said
It's because we're homeschool counselors. We have
Yeah,
like that,
yes,
that
yes,
kinship there.
totally,
I get
totally.
that, but I knew Diana before you though. Because I became an administrator a semester before you, so
That's
I had
right.
to hit up Diana.
Yes.
But you did right. You did right. Hi, Christina, it's Diana. And then something about happy hour.
Oh, I love that too. That sounds right. I have to say that I like keep like random memorabilia from like work and stuff like over the course of my life. And I keep like the cards that kids write for me and like that kind of stuff. Like those things like really do like they carry you through like
Yeah.
tough, hard days. And I feel like if I can it's a good reminder that I should try to do that more now because I feel like I've kind of fallen off of that because I'm also not like traveling to different schools, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm in one building all day now.
Mhm.
But yeah, those kind of things really do make a difference. Like I've gotten some nice notes at my school this year because I've only been there since August, and it feels nice to be like seen and appreciated, and to be able for me to have those like visuals up in my office
Yeah.
make a big difference too. And my kids see those, and I think that they see that that kind of stuff
Mhm.
matters, and that it helps them to remember that it's okay to have those reminders up for you too.
Yeah. No, yeah. It
100%.
was just such a like a but it was like such a cool moment today because I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my God, we're gonna record the podcast with her. Like, how did this
yeah,
pop
that's
up on
so
my
great.
Facebook memories from like 2015?
I was
So
gonna say so long ago. Yeah, that's so cool. I love
which is
that.
yeah, which is one of the features of Facebook I do like.
Right, of course.
So, Diana, before you tell us what you're up to right now, like what your current
Hmm.
position is right now, please share
Yeah.
some educational journeys. So you can go as far back as you want. We've had some people
Okay.
go back since like preschool, or you
Oh,
could like
wow.
start us all the way up to undergrad. It's up to you. But basically,
Okay.
what we're asking is where you are right now. Like
Mhm.
what influenced that, what inspired it, what motivated it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about like that journey being something that I have like a very specific memory of being in college in an undergrad classroom, and I think it was like a social psych class or something. I remember it being a really small classroom. There was only like 10 people in it. And we happened to have a guest speaker that day coming in. She was a recruiter for Teach for America. And she came in and was talking about this program and that they were looking for people to apply. And I was a junior at that point in college. So it was like getting to be kind of like, what are you doing next? You know, that kind of stuff. And she talked about the achievement gap. And and I know that that term is sort of shifted and we think about that differently, but like at the time it would have been probably 2002. And she was talking about how, you know, there's kids who just don't do as well in school, and it's because the system that they're in doesn't serve them. And I had never had anybody explain it like that simply before. And I just remember having this like visceral reaction that like that like wasn't fair to me. I'm somebody who has always been like very committed to things feeling fair. I think part of that is because I'm the younger of two siblings. And so that just sort of comes with like feeling like you're like always sort of getting like the second shrift on that, you know? But I think now that that's something that really does like that defines me as a person. Like, I don't know if you've ever done that thing that Brene Brown says, where you sort of like winnow it down to like the two words that are like the most important for you. And equity is always one of them, because like it's something that continues to be like a thread for me, like since, like I said, from that moment for sure. But I see that there's other things that have happened in my life even before that that really were, you know, sort of like influences in that point too. But after, so this gal talked about Teacher America, and I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. And so I started looking into it a little bit more. And then Allison Hinkle, who Elin, you probably know from OUSD. I don't know, Christina, if you ever met her, but
Yes, I remember
okay.
Allison.
Okay. So she and I have been friends since college. We met each other freshman year of college. And she actually started working for TFA as like an undergraduate student recruiter. And so I started talking to her about it. And then I ended up going through the process and applying, but I didn't get in. I got like the letter that said like, sorry, you didn't get accepted. And I was like so devastated. Like I cannot express to you like how like shocked I felt. And like, I was just so sure that that's what I was going to do after college. And so I had to really like think quickly, like, okay, well, what am I going to do instead? And so I made, you know, I found a couple jobs, and like, you know, I managed to do okay for a little bit, but I realized I probably should go to grad school because I had an undergrad in psych, and unfortunately can't really do a lot with that. And so I went to grad school and then sort of stumbled honestly into my school counseling program. But I knew that I wanted to work in education at that point, but I also knew I didn't want to be a teacher. And so coming across school counseling was just like, oh yeah, like it just sort of made like so much sense to me. And like I never would have been able to articulate it, I think, until that like moment when I was probably like 24, like starting those classes. But I can see that like even going through that process, and like one of my classes was about educational leadership. And the instructor talked a lot about how school counselors are, you know, agents of change. And I had never thought about that before, because in my experience with my school counselor, like she wasn't very nice. Like she didn't know my name. She wasn't very helpful. Like she wasn't somebody who seemed to really care. And so to have somebody explain that so differently, it was like, oh, like you could actually make things better for people, you know? And so having that again, like it's like one little moment, but like those kinds of things, they sort of like they stick into your head, you know, and then they just like, oh, like that's something that maybe I could keep doing something with, you know. And then I started working for Ed Trust West, which was also kind of like I don't know what else to do, but it was in 2008 and there was no education jobs because the recession hit. And so I had applied to probably 20 school districts in the Bay Area and didn't get a single response. And I saw this job opening at Ed Trust West and was like, that sounds like it could be something. At least I'll have a job. And I was doing like hand analysis of transcripts, like really just like tedious work. But I also got to work with folks who were doing work on like the national stage around school counseling. And I got to do work with with transforming school counseling, and like Ed Trust, the main office in DC I don't actually know if they're still doing that, but they had like this arm of work that was specifically around empowering school counselors to try to really be agents of change at schools. And that was just such a great opportunity for me to like network with experienced school counselors who really did like walk the equity walk, you know, and they could explain to me like what it meant to make a master schedule that actually serves kids, and what do you do to make sure that kids can actually aspire to, you know, be college ready, even if they don't know that they want to do that. Like that doesn't mean you close that door. Right. And so having those experiences still pretty early, you know, in my professional life really did shift that. And then when I ended up at Oakland, it was like the next step for me was to say, okay, so I've been, you know, kind of talking about these things sort of in abstractions, right? Like supporting schools, but not in schools directly. And then to be able to be like in the city where I lived and to be working with these schools, it was such a great opportunity to see how you could make a change, but then also understand like why change is so hard. Because the system is just so so slow and
Mhm.
backwards, and it's like a glacier sometimes to try to move it at all. And the frustrations, of course, are high, but then you also see you have these like small moments where you're like, oh, this is why I do this. Like
Mhm.
I was at McClymonds one day and like helped like 30 kids fill out their FAFSA. And it's like, you know, it's 30 kids and it's FAFSA, and FAFSA sucks, but like those 30 kids had the opportunity to maybe get a Pell Grant and go to college, even if
Right.
they're only going to Laney, like that
Mhm.
still can make a huge difference for them and for their family. And having the
Mhm.
opportunity to see that, having like big picture, right? Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing as a district to support students? But then also like getting in there and like working summer school, right? Like doing those things where you're like actually with kids, like you see why the work you do is so important. And that was actually what, skip ahead a little bit, that's actually why, as much as I really like doing like the coaching with the digital curriculum company, it used to be Apex, now it's Edmentum, but I loved that work because I got to work with like 30 districts across California, and I worked with teachers, counselors, administrators, assistant superintendents of curriculum. Like I really got to kind of run the gamut as far as positions. But
Yeah.
I miss being around kids. I just like
Mhm.
wasn't getting like my cup wasn't being filled the same way. And as much as I hated giving up that work because I liked a lot of the job, I just couldn't not be around kids anymore. And so I went back to this tiny little school in Milpitas with like 90 kids, and it just was like the best thing I'd ever done. I loved it so much. Like
Aw.
and these were kids who, at an
Mhm.
alternative school, these are kids that have had 15 years basically of like the worst possible school experience, right? Like
Right.
there's a reason that they're at this kind of school. And so to be able to be like a champion for them and to make them feel like, I cared about them, even if they hadn't come to school in 2 weeks, if they showed up on day number 11, great. I'm so happy you're here. Right. And
Mhm.
like to be that person who sees them and isn't like giving them a hard time, but just saying like, we're glad that you're here and how can we help it? How can we help get you here tomorrow?
Right. Yeah.
And then like one of the things that I've taken with me there that I'm working on at my new school is like really trying to support community college transitions like that are more sustainable and not so like individualized to like one kid. Not
Mhm.
that we don't want every single kid to have a warm handoff, but like it should be like a systemic ish like process, right? Like
Mhm. Mhm.
especially because like where my school is now, we're like maybe a 10-minute drive from a community college campus, and the kids could do concurrent enrollment, and we have some kids that do that now, but a lot of our students, mostly our students of color, who like really aren't ready for like a traditional 4-year college because of all kinds of things, right? Which we could talk about for probably years.
Mhm.
But that, if they want to go to community college, I want them to know that there's a process and there's a TRIO program, and I want to make sure that they know who those
Yeah.
people are that can help them. And like,
Mhm.
and so that's kind of a starting point for me because I don't have the connections that I had in
Mhm.
California,
Mhm.
but it's also a really good opportunity for me to like, make those connections. So I feel like I have more resources available to me, but also to know that then in a couple more years, like the next, the kids who maybe are in like 6th or 7th grade now, when they come to us, like we'll be ready to say, okay, this is how this is going to work. And I'm excited to be able to build that because it's not something that the school currently has. And the demographics have shifted pretty dramatically in the last couple of years. And so it hasn't really been a need in the last like probably 5 years.
Mhm.
Whereas now all of a sudden there's just a lot more kids who community college is really like the best option for them. And so having that be a really intentional process and not just sort of like oh, well, you're going to go to community college because you want to say you're doing something, right? Which also happens,
Yeah.
but to be able to make that feel like it's a more like intentional process and that it feels like an actual path for them and not
Right.
just like something you feel like you have to do because you're not sure what to do next.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece too, because well, a lot of things that I heard you say, I kind of feel like you've gathered so much information on how different systems work, and you've seen
Hmm.
it at all so many different levels, but also through different districts. And so now a
Right.
different state, you're also like
Yeah.
saying like, hey, I want community college to be like, this is another pathway. It's not like
Hmm.
oh, you don't know, okay, so this is what you do and we're going to work
Right.
per student. It's like, no,
Right.
just like we talk about going to a 4 year and building all these like events and processes for that, we also need to
Right.
treat our community college because that in itself is another pathway, it's another
Right.
option. And it's
Right.
not, and I think more and more we're hearing that and should be, doing that because it's no longer like, oh, this is what you do instead, or that's the
Right.
backup. It's more like
Right.
this is actually a really good option for a lot of students. And so
Right.
how do we make it so that it's easier to access versus it being
Mhm.
like a, you know, oh, okay, let's just figure this out real quick for you and not the
Right.
entire, you know, percentage of
Right.
students who need it.
Well, and you both know too that like as much as we all really appreciate that one-on-one connection and supporting one student, it's also a lot more efficient if you can figure out a way to support like even 15 kids at a time, right? Because
Yeah.
then you can be smarter with your time and then you can help another group of 15 kids with
Mhm.
something else, right? Like
Mhm.
it's all about tier one, like what can you do that's like a baseline for all kids, right? And like if we can figure out a way to do those in ways that are intentional, and yes, they take time to build, but it doesn't mean you
Mhm.
shouldn't do it, right? Like it's
Right.
not going to be perfect. You're not going to be able to help every kid. Like I know that every single senior who I talk to that wants to go to community college isn't necessarily going to do it. Like because I don't know that I'm in a position right now to help them do that. But if I have that goal, then I know that even if I can get like 5 kids set up right now, then I can build on that for next year, right? And
Mhm.
ideally, I'd love for it to be more because it's hard to imagine like not helping every kid like right now. But it
Mhm.
is also about building that system where the
Yeah.
foundation is strong so that if something happens and I'm not the one that's there to do that, that it still continues too, right? Because so much
Yeah.
of this stuff is like so person specific. And the minute that a
Mhm.
person leaves because they have a kid or they
Mhm.
move or they have an ailing parent and they have to take off time work, like there's all these reasons that people leave jobs, not because they're not like really happy to be there and really committed to the work, but then that stuff like falls apart and then you're
Mhm.
back to square one, and that's not fair to those kids either because they
Yeah.
shouldn't be depending on this like one person to like hold all this stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like that's why
Mhm.
it's really about having that like collaborative approach, which is why I loved the teams that we built like at Skyline and like at like Oakland Tech and Ojai with like the collaboratives, because there's so many resources and so many people that want to help
Mhm.
kids figure this stuff out, right?
Yeah.
But it's like how can you pool it in a way that actually feels like you're being efficient and effective, and like you can scale it up in a way that actually means it's going to work, right? Because people have plenty of ideas, but like we don't need any more ideas, right? Like we just need to be able to like do the things that we know that work
Mhm.
Right.
and have
That,
leaders who support that, right? And say that
Oh
this is
yeah,
actually
100%.
important and not decide to like pull the rug out from you because of some grant funding or like just a change of opinion, right? Like it's like
Right.
some of that stuff feels so political, and that's the part that like makes it hard too. Like that's
Mhm.
why people leave jobs, because they're just like, I don't want to deal with this other stuff. Like I love the work, but the
Yep.
stuff that makes the job hard, like that's the reason people leave.
Mhm.
right. And that's where equity comes into play, right? It's like,
Hmm.
it's not the matter of like, we need to see every single 12th grader 4 times a year. And that's
Right.
regardless if they have a 4.0 or a 0.9. It's like,
Right.
no, like, it's okay to see your four, to see a group of 15 students that have a
Yep.
4.73
Yep.
GPA. Like,
By
no
the way,
big
I have a kid with a 4.65, I think is my
Okay,
highest
my bad.
GPA. Yeah. But no, but I mean like, but that's real, right? Like
Mhm.
that's legit.
Yeah.
There are going to be kids who are doing that, but clearly
Right.
they're
It's like,
doing okay.
who should you be
Yeah.
seeing 4 times a
Right.
year?
Mhm.
Right?
Exactly.
Is it the one that
Exactly.
has a 4 point plus
Right.
or the
Right.
ones that are below a 1.99?
Right.
Right?
And honestly, and also those are the same kids who it's also hard to get them in your office sometimes, right? Because there's all
100%.
kinds of stuff happening outside of their school life too that makes it hard for them sometimes to be in the building. But
Mhm.
that's also like, that's okay. Like it's
Yep.
okay to divide that time differently depending on what the kids need. Like it
Mhm.
can't be a one size fits all. It's never going to get us where we're going,
Mhm.
where we
And
want to
that's
go.
where it's the importance of truly understanding what equity is
Right.
and what equity looks like.
Mhm.
And
Well, and
what
what
equity looks like specifically at your school site
right.
Right.
based on your current student needs,
Mhm.
Mhm.
based on the school initiatives that you are that the school is hosting at their school site.
Right.
Because, like Elin and I, we are school leader coaches.
Mhm.
And at times we see veteran administrators trying to cut and paste what
Mhm.
they did at one school at their
Yep.
new school. And it's us
Yeah.
reminding them, like, look, kudos to your old school. We're glad that that process and protocol worked over there.
Yep.
But it worked over there for those particular students, for those
Mhm.
particular staff, for that
Mhm.
particular community needs.
Yeah.
Well, and even like
Meanwhile,
that
now
particular
at
school
another
year,
school,
right? Yeah,
right?
because
Yeah.
you think about like after COVID hit, like shit got blown up, right? Like, I mean, schools are struggling like across the board because they can't keep staff, right? Kids have these huge educational gaps where they don't know what they don't even understand at this point because it's been so many years of like piecemeal stuff, right? And those are the kids who probably were still like even the kids who were like engaged and their parents were like on them and they had like reliable internet, right? And like devices that worked. Like those are the things that like even those kids are struggling still. Like some of my seniors, I'm like, you can tell that they haven't had like a normal year of high school, even though they're like okay, like academically, but it's like,
Right.
are they actually going to do well in college? Like, I don't
Right.
know.
Because they were
You know?
freshmen when all this
Right.
was going down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and so then, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points, and you kind of already addressed this, but I'm curious, especially coming from like California and the work that you
Mhm.
did in Oakland to now
Yeah.
being in Colorado. And you mentioned like, some systems that you're trying to put in place, but what
Mhm.
are some other things that you're doing now or that you've kind of like taken from California
Mhm.
and trying to kind of like inject a little bit into your work or into your role now, especially when we think about, like Christina said, equity, but also just educational justice, like really thinking
Sure.
about who's being served and how are we serving
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because I didn't really realize how different California and Colorado were until I like started working, right? Because I was home, I stayed home with my daughter for a couple of years, and then I went back to work two school years ago now. And I kind of went in there going like, oh well, I know everything, like I'll be fine, and then it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but you don't, because like even the graduation requirements like are,
Mm,
I mean, they're different in every district, right? But like
mhm.
in Colorado, there's also this like college and career readiness like benchmark you have to meet. So every single kid to get your diploma, you have to, in addition to whatever your district says for your credits, you also have to reach like an English and a math benchmark. So it could be based on an SAT score, an AP test score, an ASVAB score, an AccuPlacer score. You could do like a capstone project. Like there's like 10 or 12 different things you can pick from. But theoretically, you have to do math and English for at one of these options for every single kid to graduate. And like, I remember when I heard that, I was like, what? Like, I mean, just the management of that is a
Yeah.
lot of work. Like last year was the first year that it went into effect. And so like my whole
Oh,
team and I were like trying to figure it out. And the data is crap. Like they don't know how to track it yet. And there's like all this stuff that makes it really hard. Like we literally had, like for me, like I had like paper copies of all of my seniors grad plans and was like making notes about whether they had met those benchmarks because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. There was nothing in our student information system where you could
yeah.
actually like check a box. And so like you just had to like, I had like a spreadsheet of SAT scores. Oh, because the other thing is in Colorado, kids, the 11th grade like standardized test is the SAT.
Oh,
And so like every kid takes the SAT, like, whether they're college bound or whatever you want to call it, right? So the nice thing at least is you have that data point, but then you also see that like there's a lot of kids that aren't at that benchmark. They're not ready, right? So it's like,
right.
do you get them to do an SAT prep class? Like, do you have them consider maybe another option, right? Like there's plenty of other
That is
options for them to
so
meet it.
interesting. Sorry. I just
Yeah.
like
No, it's
because of the
wild,
hold that
right?
College Board has, and like now
Yes.
this
Oh
like
my gosh.
this
Oh my
state is
gosh.
saying
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
all of our juniors are taking
Yep.
the SAT, which like
Yep.
in California we don't even like use anymore. So it's
Well,
just
and that's what's so crazy is so many schools in Colorado too are test
Mhm.
optional. Like, and I just got an email the other day that said NCAA is saying SAT scores aren't going to be like considered for kids to like to be admitted to those schools too. And I'm like, so the SAT is becoming like passe, but then
Like
yeah, like the College Board
obsolete.
still has this just like
It's yeah,
stranglehold. Like
still.
AP is still
Mm-hmm.
like the gold standard, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Mhm.
okay, like it's not bad, but like is that the best possible thing for our kids? Like not
Well, and
necessarily,
it hasn't been interrogated enough, like, or at
Right,
least like it has been, but no one's like really paying attention to like
right.
again how it's not addressing the needs of all learners.
Of all
And
learners, exactly. Yep.
so
Right.
yeah.
And like just like a overall like expectation of how to get into the AP courses
Yep.
Mm,
and
Right.
Like,
Well, and I see
if you
I see
need
like both.
support, like what does that look like? So it's like each school district has their own, not even school district. Let me back up. Each school site has
Yep.
their own process and
If
protocol.
there even is one. I mean, and
Right.
that's the thing, like, so the school I was at last year and the school I'm at now, they do have like open access for AP. And then also, so the school that I work at, it's actually an IB school. So we have AP classes too, but there's an IB like option. You can do like a la carte, or you can do the diploma program. And that's again like open enrollment. So like in theory, everybody has equal access to those classes, right? In both schools. But then you think about it and you're like, okay, but what happens if you're in it and you're not doing well, right? Like, what if you've never had, like, if you started in like pre-algebra, like as an eighth grader, like you're not high enough to be able to take calc as a senior, even if you wanted to take an AP class, right? Like, there's so many like systemic things that still provide these barriers to students to take them, to do well, to like feel successful, to then get a good enough score to get credit so they can actually take it to college, right? There's like all these steps that are part of that, that it's like, just because you're offering AP or IB or whatever it is, right? Like there's still not enough intentional intervention happening to like help kids like in that moment, like when they get to something where they don't get it, it's like, okay, well, do you want to just drop the class then, or do you want to just fail? It's like, are these the options? Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing in the middle. But then it's also like, when are teachers supposed to have time for that?
Right.
Like, there's no time, because there's like anytime you have like, you know, team time, or like we have like late starts that are like district PD time that's sort of set aside. But then it ends up being like so much like, I mean, honestly, it feels performative and it's not useful. And so the stuff that we could actually be talking about, like how are we helping our kids who like aren't good readers, you know, like there's no time to do that kind of stuff either. And that, to me, that's a hard like pill to swallow, because like I personally can't figure out like, how do I help my kids who aren't good readers? Like, I don't know how to do that, right? Like, that's not my expertise. There's also just there's still a lot we don't know about like how to help kids depending on like what gaps they have, right? Especially if they're like English language learners, right? Like there's all these other things involved, and like trauma informed, like care. I mean, there's like all these pieces, right, that impact that stuff too. And it's hard because there isn't like an easy way to fix that. And it's hard too because I feel like we don't ever have enough time to like really think through like, are there things we could at least try, you know? Like,
and that's where that whole village concept,
right.
makes
And I
sense.
think too, like, and it's hard too though, because I mean, you know, when you used to be at like one building, like when you're in a building, like you're in that building, like you're in that world, and it's so tough to like go somewhere else, right? Like it's like, oh, you can go and like observe another school. Like, okay, when am I going to be gone from my school for 2 hours without some fire happening, right? Where then I like immediately get a text and something has gone terribly wrong, right? Like, it's so tough to be able to like take those things that are working in other places, because you don't even know that they're going on. You're like in this, you just have like your blinders on, because everything feels urgent, right? Like these are like kids' lives. These are like families, like trajectories that are like so important to us, like in a visceral way, right? So it's like, you don't like, everything feels super important, but then how do you decide that it's like what is it, like what's urgent, what's important, like what's a priority? It's like, it's so hard to gauge those things when your heart knows that there's so many things that you wish you could be doing like simultaneously to like support your families.
Well, to support your families and also to take care of yourself, because it's difficult to take care of others if you yourself are not physically and mentally, socially and emotionally stable.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
it's like, I mean, like just like the educator, like guilt, and the educator just like being emotionally drained. It's real.
Yes.
Well, and just feeling like you have to be the one who somehow fixes it all, right?
Right. And then you feel like, you know, you're like, if you don't commit to this, like you're going to be seen as incompetent, or that you don't care.
Right.
But if you do address it, then what's happening at your family, like, you know what I'm saying? Like at your family household. So it's like, there's this constant battle. So with that said, so Diana, what do you do for self-care?
Oh man. I mean, it's actually interesting that you asked this now, because I feel like even a year ago, my answer would have been so different, because I would have been like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
because so I have
Self-care, what?
right. So I have a 4-year-old, and you know, last year when I went back to work after a 2-year break of after moving to a different state, having COVID hit, right? Like living with a small human in your house, which just upends everything. Like everything you think you know about your life and like what's important to you and like how you're going to spend your time all gets blown to shit, right? So it's like you're
Yeah.
you're like literally putting the pieces together, but it's like a totally different puzzle than the one that you had before. So you're like, there's all these pieces are missing, right? So you're like literally trying to figure that out every day, right? Like that whole idea of like building the plane
And
while you're flying
Diana,
it. Like,
let me add too, like, even though if you're a planner,
oh, and I am a hardcore planner, like
you
so
got
obsessive.
your agenda, you put
Yep.
in your written journal, you put it in Google Calendar.
Yep.
That shit doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And it, like I said, it just, all of that goes out the window. And then, so I go back to work. I'm in a new state. I've got a whole new team. I've got, you know, kids I've never met. I've got a daughter who just started, she started preschool like the week before I started working again. So our whole family, our whole house is just in like total upheaval, right? And then I'm just dealing with like, you know, kids who are dealing with like severe mental health issues. Like I was doing like suicide assessments like on the reg for the first semester. It was rough. Like, and I'm going like, I don't even know where all the paperwork is, right? Like I don't know what end is up, because even though I've been working for 12 years, I think at that point, like I had taken some time off. I was in a new school, a new district, right? Like all this stuff was different. I was using a totally new student information system that I'd never seen before. Like all this stuff, right? And you're like, and I'm like a competent person, and I'm still just like buried and like totally like
no, girl,
like
talk
so
to you know, like it's not
like,
even like a state thing. It's like a district thing. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter like how
Exactly. Anytime you're
experienced you are
new.
with trauma
Yep.
informed shit. It's like
Yep.
if you don't follow the whole district procedure.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
I've
and then
been
you think
called out
about
on
too.
that. And I'm just like, oh, well, my bad. I didn't know it was like that.
Well, and then you think about like how good is the training you're getting as like a new employee, like because it's like they jam it in, right? It's like all this,
especially
it's
when
like,
you tell them your experience,
right?
they don't be
Right.
sending you to training.
No. And then they also you spend time like doing like HR paperwork, and it's like, okay, but this is not useful to me. Like pay me for my time. I will come to HR in like the middle of July and do all that shit. And then the first 2 weeks of August, like I want you to give me like, this is the stuff you actually need to know, right? And I still feel like I used to facilitate professional development. Like I know it's really hard to do it well. And I don't have all the answers, but it's like even like as a new employee, like that whole PD model is like garbage, right? Like there's it's like you kind of do this thing where you give they like dump all this stuff into your head, and they kind of do like the rah like, oh, we're so happy you're here, and like, and as a counselor you also feel totally alienated because it's mostly new teachers and you're not a teacher, right? So they're telling you all this stuff and you're sitting through all this stuff about curriculum that is not the way that you spend your time. And so it's hard to like make those adjustments, right? And so, and it's also
I
weird.
can tell you what's going through the teachers' minds.
Oh yeah, they just want time to be able to like do like to plan their lesson plans and like actually feel like they're able to like use their time wisely too,
and
right?
the moment you tell them that you're not a teacher, they're already it's like,
yeah, yep,
like,
right.
And I'm here because
right, totally. And it's interesting to see, like, because I've now compared like new teacher orientation like to 2 different districts, and the model at my current district is better. I mean, it's still, like I said, I think it still leaves a little bit to be desired, just because people come in with so many different levels of experience, right? Like brand new teachers need very different support than a counselor who's been working for 10 plus years, right? Like I needed like technical training on like the student information system. And I needed someone to tell me like, these are your senior transcripts, like start looking at these, right? Like, and it's like, that's the kind of stuff that I feel like they're not necessarily setting you up to be successful, not because they're trying to like trip you up, but they don't get it. Like there's still such a disconnect, I think, between, I think especially for counselors, but like for a lot of other, like for most school district employees, like the people who are making those like higher level decisions, they were in the classroom, but it's been 20 years, or they never were because they kind of fast tracked up, right? They like did their admin credential when they were like 26, and then they just kind of have been in these like different like coordinator, manager, whatever positions, and it's like, that's great, but you don't know what it's like day to day, right?
I'm sorry,
like,
I gotta laugh because Elin and I were in the
was that how old you guys were?
yes.
No, we were a little bit older, Christina.
I was 26. You were maybe 26.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, but we didn't go.
Okay,
you know what I
whatever.
mean?
But we
you know what I
spent
mean,
time
like,
at the school site. We didn't
but
like
right.
fast track through
No.
to go to the district.
Right.
But
No,
I
and
hear
that's
what
what I
you're
mean. Like
saying.
you, right. But like you went through that process because it was valuable to you to be a leader at your school.
Yeah.
It wasn't because you were like, oh, I'm going to get up on the salary schedule so I can have like a cushy
no,
job,
that never,
right?
I mean, like 100% with
Right.
But I
did
totally
not think about that.
But Chris,
Right.
but like, but Diana, I totally get what you're saying. And I think it even goes back to what you're trying to do with like at your school site with community college is like understanding that there needs to be systems put in place that meet students where they're at. And so it's the same thing. Like what you're saying is, even at the district level, like there needs to be systems put in place to meet the employees of where they're at. And like there has to be a lot more intention when it comes to planning these sort of things. And I feel like there hasn't been enough of a push for people at the district level to really think through that way, or to like sit and think like, let me see who our new hires are. What do they actually need? It's just like copy paste from one year to the next, 1 year to the next. And it wasn't until I started a district after leaving, being an admin, going back into counseling, and I switched into districts, and I'm like, I knew enough to say, I don't need this unless you're giving me something specific to counseling. I would much rather use this time to meet with my team. And so it was like through that advocacy, but it was like kind of like mind blowing though, because they're like, what do you mean? Oh, we're gonna tailor it. I was like, no. You're not gonna tailor any of this to meet my needs. There's no way.
But the thing it's wonderful that you could say that, because they respect you. They know you know your shit. They know you're administrator.
Right.
And I even feel like at my team I'm at now, because like that was the same thing. Like, it was like they were sending me these agendas for the stuff, and I'm like, I don't need to sit through this stuff. Like I really don't.
Yeah,
like,
don't try to bamboozle me. I don't gotta sit through this.
Right. And like, unfortunately, like my team, the other counselors were like, yeah, you don't have to go to any of that. Like, you should just come to school, and like, and it's fine because they, like I said, they trusted my judgment and knew that I knew what I needed. But there's something that I've been thinking about just since we started talking is that, like, remember I was saying before how about like the movement is so slow. It's like this glacial pace, right? And like, and everything we're talking about, like with student interventions, like thinking about adjusting to COVID, like supporting kids who have been through trauma, like all of that requires so much flexibility, and the system we are in is like so incredibly inflexible. Like it's a fucking piece of concrete. It's a piece of concrete. Like, and we're thinking about something that's like a rubber band. Like they're not compatible. It's like everything. It's like sometimes I really am just like, I feel like we just need to blow the whole thing up and start over. Like I don't know what it would look like, but the concrete is like not working. It is not working.
The concrete has been cracked.
Yes.
Yeah, we gotta stop retrofitting it. We just gotta like really start over.
Stop trying to fix the potholes. Like the potholes are just too damn deep. You might as well just resurface the whole damn thing.
Yes. Like invest in some new fucking assholes. Don't just do the pothole filling.
Oh my
God. Diana, real talk though.
How do you manage to like show up every day? Because you gotta take care of yourself.
For self-care.
Oh, right. I never answered that question. So, well, last year I did a shit job of it. So thank God you didn't ask me.
We all go through that. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, something that has been a huge help for me is that, so my new job, my contract day is 30 minutes less. And like, even though I typically stay a little bit later still, you could stay forever and you wouldn't get all the work done. But like having that, like, honestly, permission to be like, oh, I don't have to stay. Like it's given me some freedom, not only to be able to like do pickup and like do those kinds of things, but like to be like, oh, I can go home now. Like I've done my piece. Like I've worked my time. like they're paying me for this amount of time. I could work more, but they're not going to pay me more. So like, that's my choice, right? If I want to overwork myself, but I don't get any benefit from that. My students also don't really, right? Because then you're burnt out.
Right.
So I think having like less contract time and knowing that that's like the structure I'm in, also being around other team members who also like make an effort to leave on time as well, because they have families and stuff too. Like having that modeled as like the starting point from the beginning of the school year was like such a revelation. Cause like, I mean, in Oakland, like you literally could work yourself to death. Like I mean, I was writing emails like on Saturdays at 11 p.m. because I'm thinking, oh, if I just write it now, then I won't have to worry about it on Monday. Except no, because then I get 4 more responses, you know, like on a Sunday morning.
Within that time frame. Exactly.
Exactly.
Like,
while you're writing it.
Right. You're not actually making any, you're doing is you're just extending the work to be in, like literally you're like 24 hours a day. Right. So having that like clear sort of delineation of time for me has been helpful. And like, I read a ton. Like I listen to audiobooks. I read a lot of, I don't read a lot of light books. I look through my like nonfiction pile that I read from like 2022. And I'm like, these are all like pretty intense books. Like even my fiction are like pretty depressing, to be honest. Like, and like somebody else just posted on my book pages, like, oh, I hadn't heard of it, but a book called The Last Slave Ship. And it sounds really interesting. I mean, obviously like very like depressing subject matter, but important. Right. And I was like, oh, I got to add that to my list. And I'm like, but this is not like, I need to also like do things that aren't like totally intense. Like,
well, I was going to say, Diana, the book that we recommended to you, I think is right up your alley.
Well, I am reading The Summer I Turned Pretty. Does that count? Like,
okay, I read that whole series. Yes. And then I watched it on Netflix.
I watched it.
Sometimes
I watch it on TV.
Yes.
And I think having given myself some more permission around that, like just like to try to take things a little bit less seriously, because it is hard though, because you know, like I said, like this work is so important, and like it's like we would do it. Like when I was a counseling intern and wasn't getting paid, like that's when I knew I picked the right job, because I didn't care that I wasn't getting paid. I was going to do it anyway, you know. And so it can be tough though to like take that off and be like, it's also okay to do things that you like to do just because you like to do them. Right. Like I can't, my screen is blurred, but I'm like surrounded by all of my scrapbooking material. I actually scrapbook a lot.
You know what, Diana, before you blurred your background, it looked like you were at an art studio.
Oh no, it's actually our very messy basement.
Oh my bad.
So we have like I have like all my holiday decorations are like lined up very nicely. My Peloton is right here. Shout out to my Peloton, because that's also a source of self-care.
Yes, it is.
That I can walk down to my basement. I don't have to drive to the gym, because let's be real, I'm not doing that. So I mean, I think this year I've started to find like things that have helped me feel more like sane. But it's a struggle, right? Because you come home some days and some days just really suck. Like I've had some really intense situations with some of my students this year. It's been a hard school year. We lost a student who died unexpectedly, like in the fall. Like we've had other stuff going on in the district where we've lost students and like staff members and stuff. Like it's hard. Like it's a hard job, because you care about people, and even if they're people you don't know, it like affects you, because you think about like how that ripples out to the community, right? So it's not easy, but you have to like, I mean, I have to tell myself constantly, it's also okay to like, let it go for a couple of hours. Like I don't check my email at home. I really try not to, because I don't need to get pulled back into that, you know, like, because it's like, I can feel my like heart racing sometimes if I like see an email from a parent who's like pissed about something. Like, I don't need to worry about that right now. Like, what is that going to do for me at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday? Like, I'm not going to talk to that. I'm not going to call that parent. I'm not going to respond to that email. Like, I need to just like leave it alone. And like, when I'm like, when I'm rested, when I'm like more clear headed, when I'm not so like exhausted, right? Like giving myself some time to like, even waiting a day. Like, I also try to respond to emails if I'm really pissed. Like I try to wait a little bit before I reply. I used to be a lot worse
you could draft something too, and then like wait, just keep it in the draft.
Yeah, like I do truly try to like take a beat, because I know that like if I'm that keyed up, I'm not gonna be able to like meet this person wherever they are too, and like find some kind of solution. So like really trying to remember that like it's okay to have those emotions, but maybe don't respond with those emotions, right? because it's going to end up just getting like more complicated.
100%. No, I mean, I think you listed some really good ones for a lot of us to think about. Even just the email and like really giving yourself time.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna wrap up this episode, and we asked this one question to all of our guests. And I'm really excited to ask you this one, because like when guests know like what we mean by the hill, that's why I get excited, because how Skyline was like you had to drive up the hill. So
totally.
We asked all of our guests these questions, and we're actually going to create a playlist with all of these songs.
Awesome.
But tell us, like, what is that one song that gets you up the hill?
Yeah. I read that question when you emailed it, and I was thinking about it. And the first thing that came to my mind, like without overthinking it, which I think is what I have to go with otherwise, because I could think about it all day. John Mayer has a song called, I think it's called The Heart of Life. I just know that the chorus is, I know the heart of life is good. And it's like one of those songs where like I usually cry when I listen to it, because I usually turn it on when I'm like feeling emotional. And so it's like a way for me to have some release. But I think it's a very simple reminder that like, even when shit is hard, it doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And that like the people that we work with, even the people who frustrate us, like they also believe in something. And so we have to figure out like, how do we bring them along and like find something that we both believe in. And like, even the teachers who, I'm really fortunate at my current school, I don't feel like I have a single teacher who I think this way, but I've had other experiences that have not been like that, where there's teachers who I feel like, why do you do this? Like, you seem like you don't like kids. Right. And like, and I have to tell myself like, they started liking kids, right? Like there's nobody starts as a teacher because they like hate kids.
And like you're like, what the fuck happened?
Right? I know, but then you think about like over their career, like what have they experienced? Like how many shitty principals have they had? How many terrible parents have they had? Like how many, like what has happened to them in their life outside of school that has made things hard, right? Like there's all these factors that like everybody brings all of this stuff into that classroom on that day. And like trying to remember that like they at least started with that point is like a helpful reminder that like there's got to be something we can relate on, right? Like we have some kind of common ground here. And even if it's because we both like to have summers off, like that's fine too. Like, you know what I mean? Like if that's like where we start from, like there's got to be something that we can at least like connect on. Otherwise we're never going to be able to get anything else done.
Yeah. I love that.
So I'll send you the link for the song if you don't know it. But it's just, that whole album is like, it's like a very special album for me. I know that John Mayer is like kind of a polarizing figure for people.
I was going to say, Diana, I feel like you are age stamping us.
Yes, I know, totally.
Because when you say John Mayer, I think of 1999 to 2003. Yes.
No, totally. So this song is from Continuum, which came out in 2003. It's 20 years old now.
What did I say?
I know.
Wow.
I know. Crazy.
Oh
but like,
gosh.
I don't know about y'all, but like, I don't really listen to any new music.
40 without saying you're 40.
Yeah, right?
Oh my God. Now we're telling our ages.
I know.
Well, Diana, thank you. This was such a great conversation. We appreciate you being on our podcast. And there's just like a lot that we can take from all that you shared in your experience and just what you're working on. So thank you.
Yeah,
This was such a treat. And I am so proud of the work that you continue to do. I love to know that you're supporting school leaders and really trying to change the experience that kids have, because they deserve to have more than they've gotten. And so I just, to publicly say, like, keep up the good work. And I'm just so proud to know you both.
Oh, thank you.